Hi folks, Ricky Tang here, and I thought it was about time that I give you a 10,000 mile update on my BMW R1250R. I've had it for about 18 months now. I bought it on the 18th of March 2021. That video's actually from the first day that I collected the machine. Looking a good bit cleaner than it is now. In the background is just playing some of my YouTube videos on my channel from the bike. I've got a R1250R playlist if you're interested in taking a look at that. That's why sometimes you might see some subtitles or some text appear on the screen during the videos. So I'll give you a little recap of how we got here, why I bought the bike, what I think of it, and how we're getting on after 10,000 miles. So why did I buy this bike? Well, let's go back to the previous two bikes that I owned prior to this one. The oldest bike out of those two would be a Suzuki Bandit 1250, a half-faired model. And I got that because I like torque. I like a lot of torque. And the 1250 Bandit certainly had a lot of grunt, mid-range grunt. And it was fast as well. It was about 100 horsepower or so. And it was a quick machine. Sounded good once I put a silencer on it. Anyway, what frustrated me about the bike was the suspension. The suspension was rather low budget, yeah, not very plush. It had no electronics to speak of. Yes, it had ABS and traction control, but that is it basically. So no settings, no electronics, no gadgets. And unfortunately, I'm a bit of a magpie when it comes to gadgets. I like my electronic toys. So yeah, after several years, I thought it was time for a change. Also, the bike was rather heavy. And so I ended up trading it in for a BMW S1000R, the naked model. Now, the performance on that bike was mind-blowing. Absolutely loved it. I loved the lightweight and I loved the electronics. But I missed the low down torque, the low down grunt of the Bandit. I loved it to begin with, but the novelty soon wore off with that bike, unfortunately. So somehow I kind of wanted to combine the two in my next bike. I only owned the S1000R for about, I think it was 14 months, and I only did 4,000 miles on it. And during my ownership of the S1000R, I got an email, as you do, from the shop that sold me the bike in the first place, Lind Motorrad from Welwyn Garden City. And this bike was mentioned in one of the offers for a new R1250R, low rate finance, lowish. And eventually, yeah, I fell for it. It's the bike I think I should have bought instead of the S1000R, because I did test ride this at the time of the S1000R, but the performance of the S1000R kind of won me over. This bike is more fun for me than the S1000R could ever be on the road without going to jail. Were there any initial problems with this bike? Only one concern that I remember really from the early days, although I might moan more if I look back at some of my earlier videos. I felt there was a bit of vibration in the shaft drive at certain revs or through the transmission. But after the first service, basically the shop couldn't find any problems. And ever since then, really, it's not proven to be a problem. I barely notice it. I think it's still there if I look for it. Around about 3,000 RPM, there's just a little cyclical vibration in the transmission, but I don't look for it anymore. So it's not a problem for me really. So let's have a little close-up look at the bike, and I'll let you know what I think of certain aspects of the construction of this machine. First thing perhaps to mention is the switchgear, because they're the things you kind of interact with most often on the bike pretty much, apart from the throttle and the brakes. I'll get to those in a minute. Switchgear, yeah, quite clicky. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the indicator cancel button, especially with gloves on. Just feels a little bit indistinct. Sounds good now, but the feel isn't brilliant. Anyway, moving on. I'm happy with the levers as well. Span adjustable, brake and clutch. And one of the things I like the most is that it's a hydraulic clutch. So the lever action is always nice and light. So you never get an aching hand after spending some time in stop-start traffic, which is awesome. Mirrors do vibrate, especially when you kind of do some accelerating and give the throttle a good tug, but generally they're okay. Not amazing, but I can see behind me normally when I'm riding, so they do the job. Headlight, oh, don't get me started on the headlight. I just don't like, well, two things. The fact that it's still a halogen headlight, and I just don't like the styling of it and how low it is down the forks. But what can you do about it? Not much. Not about spending lots of money. So I just live with it. About time I give you a little backstory about these stickers. Yeah, so it's not just because I wanted an R1250R branding on the front of the bike. The story goes back to the fitting of my fender extender, where I took the mudguard off the bike to fit the fender extender. And as I then presented the mudguard back to the bike, I said to myself, wouldn't it be funny if I've managed to drill the wrong end of the mudguard? Yeah, I did. I fitted it on the wrong end. So I needed to find some kind of BMW white colour stickers to cover the holes. So I found some BMW R1250R stickers in white and yeah, plonked them on. So that's the reason why basically I got that on the fork. I think it looks okay, not amazing, not horrific, but it's up to you what you think of it, really. Not that I care. So yeah, that's the reason the stickers on the forks. We have heated grips here, 2-stage heated grips. I've got no particular complaints about them. Some people find they don't get hot enough or they're too hot on the second setting. You look at the manual, it says the second setting really is just to warm these heated grips up quickly, and then you should switch it to level 1 anyway. If I rode in the winter, then perhaps level 1 wouldn't be warm enough. But I don't ride in the winter, so there's no real big problem for me. The seat. Now, recently, I went for a little trip up to the north of England, went as far as Cheshire, just below the Scottish borders. I did 1,200 miles in a week, including an 8-hour and a 10-hour day riding on this bike, only stopping for fuel and a bite to eat. Is the seat comfortable? Not really. After a couple of hours, your bum does go a bit numb, but the seat's quite wide, so you can shuffle around a bit side to side and backwards and forwards, depending on the size of your bottom. And what I found kind of most frustrating after several hours in the saddle is just the edges just cut into the underside of my thighs a little bit, just put a little pressure on my thighs. So that's a little bit aggravating after a while, but again, you can move around on the bike. This is the standard seat, not the low or the sport seat. Am I tempted to try either seat? Maybe the sport one, perhaps one day, which comes up a bit higher. I think it's 840 versus 820 mil, if I remember rightly. One day I might try it, but I'm in no rush. Like I say, 8 hours in a day, 10 hours in a day, I survived. It wasn't too uncomfortable. In terms of pillion accommodation, unfortunately I cannot comment because I've never taken a pillion on my bike. I don't take pillions very often at all, so you'll have to find some other video for people's opinions on the back seat. Generally speaking, vibrations are kept to a very low level, and this is one of the things I really like about this bike. It's not perfectly smooth by any stretch, but the vibrations are kept well in check, partially due to the nice thick footrest. Let me show you the pillion one. That's quite a big footrest rubber there. I'm showing you that one first, so I can then show you the rider's one. Now, bit of an issue there. Now, why has that happened? Well, I think it's my own fault. It's because I often mount the bike, especially with luggage, by standing on the foot peg first. So what I find, what I've realised I've been doing is when I've been getting on off the bike by standing on the foot peg, I've been twisting my foot. So I've been putting a lot of pressure on the rubber. The other one's intact on the left-hand side, which is good. But yeah, this one's ripped away, so I've got to get a new footrest rubber sometime soon. Build quality after 10,000 miles and 18 months. Let's have a look at the front of the engine here. Obviously there's a few bugs and whatnot, but the paint seems intact and these are very exposed, as you can see. And I've been on several track days and I think that's just another bit of rubbish on the... Oh, actually, interestingly, I think I have found a stone chip. Let's have a look. Well, you heard it here first, folks. I have got a stone chip on the cylinder. So I think I might have to get this to BMW to see if I can actually get this touched up under warranty. Not too sure if that's possible or not. Well, I'll have a word. Other side. Ooh. Bit mucky, but seemingly all intact. So generally, apart from that unfortunate stone chip there, I think the build quality of the bike is pretty darn solid. It should be for the amount it weighs. The only thing that really frustrates me about this bike, about the build quality or the assembly quality, are the exposed wires. I mean this. Why? Why would you leave them exposed? Why wouldn't you put the sheath all the way up to the top? Can you imagine buying this bike in, 20 years time or 10 years time? These tiny cables, they are not going to be in the best of conditions, I don't think. So that's the most disappointing aspect, I think, of the build quality of this machine. Moving on to the instruments. Generally, oh yes, I know I'm running out of fuel. Generally, I am happy with the instrument quality. I mean, leagues ahead of anything I've owned before, basically. So I can't really complain. But if you're pushing me, what I find annoying is Bluetooth connection to my phone. So very often over the last 18 months, I get to this page and my phone's been forgotten. I must have reconnected or repaired my phone to this bike maybe 20 times in the last 18 months. The phone hasn't changed. It's just the bike just keeps forgetting the connection, which is quite frustrating. And when it's connected because you've got the little phone symbol on there, and if you've got speed warnings activated, because that is optional on the display, you'll have that warning on the screen as well. Navigation's there because my phone is connected again and it's using the BMW app potentially for turn-by-turn navigation. I'm happy enough with that. I wish I could have full screen navigation, but I haven't. So, I use my phone or use some other navigation solution anyway. I do like the sport screen. So yeah, I like that. Although it's a shame that on other models, even the F900R, I think you can actually scroll right on this screen and get a lap timer page, which is not available on this bike. So yeah, it's a bit lacking some of the functionality compared to its sister models. I do like looking at my details. I just love the information on here. The emergency message there, well, the message on the display there is just for fuel. If I just scroll all the way to the right, it's just saying messages from the computer. Tank reserve level reached. So you can see here on my onboard computer, I last reset the trip meter 1800 miles ago, and the average fuel consumption, according to the computer, 51 miles per gallon. That's included a couple of track days, but it's also included the 1200 mile, long trip up north. So overall, I think over 50 miles per gallon average is pretty impressive for a 1250cc engine. So what have I fitted to this bike? Well, I fitted initially an extended rear mudguard. I think this is for the Australian market, because I've seen some horrific images of this bike, the rear of this bike covered in crap because of riding in the rain. And I thought that would help, so I bought it. It hasn't really helped. Rubbish gets thrown up, dirty water gets thrown up from the back wheel, misses all this, hits the back seat. The only thing that really helps in wet weather is if I've got a top box as well. That stops a lot of the rubbish getting thrown up over the back of the bike. I do have a mud sling as well from Machine Art Moto. That protects the rear shock. So the rear shock, although it is grubby, I don't keep it clean particularly. This bike's been through a lot of shitty weather and it's still in pretty good order, that shock. It's not covered in rubbish, which is nice. One thing that's a bit disappointing is my boot has worn away a little bit of the coating on the footrest hanger there, but it's not a biggie. Things get worn. That's just the way it is, isn't it? It can't stay pristine forever. Anyway, things that I bought, sorry, I digress. SP Engineering exhaust. Now I've got a whole playlist about the exhaust dramas I've had on this bike, trying to get it to sound a bit nicer and a little bit louder. I noticed on this one, it's actually getting a bit stained, this material, but I can't really complain because I've got a home brewed baffle, a welded together home designed baffle in the back of this bike. So maybe the gas is getting a bit stuck at this point of the exhaust. Who knows, but the bike performs well, as good as with the OEM exhaust as far as I'm concerned, although I've not had it on a dyno yet. That is a plan one day when I'm getting a tyre close to being worn out. I do want to get it on a dyno and find out what this exhaust is doing to the bike, whether it's affecting the air fuel ratio. We'll see how that goes. So anyway, what else have I fitted? Ultimate add-ons, DIN socket. I've got a BMW kind of, you know, the mini lighter socket back in there somewhere. So this is an adapter that gives you 2 USBs. Now this is my second one that I received this week because I actually burnt out the first one. I was powering 2 action cameras at once from the previous one of these, and I was at a track day a couple of weeks ago, and the camera stopped charging. So yeah, the reason was this died. I think I just overloaded it. So I've got another one on there, and I think I'll probably end up plugging one USB item in at a time from now on. What else? Denali lights. Now the main reason I bought these was because the headlight, the low beam for riding in at night, basically was hopeless. I eventually realized that this headlight was set too low from the factory and the low beam was basically too close to me. Now I've adjusted this low beam, it's okay at night without needing these. I don't use these at night with the low beam because I get flashed all the time by oncoming traffic. Even when these lights are set to 10% at night, the lowest setting they can be on, I still get flashed by oncoming traffic. So I find that this is good enough at night for low beam. When I switch onto high beam, that's when these come on, 100%, day or night. When I go high beam, they are night and day difference. And a great addition to high beam on the headlights. So I'm happy to have these, even though I don't use them at night the way I expected to. I just have them with high beam basically. And I do have them on during the day as just extra riding lights at 10%. And yeah, no one flashes me during the day. So yeah, I'm quite happy to have these lights on overall. Snail horns, ugly. The bracketry is the real lash up that I've put on this bike, but I've got snail horn here and one on the opposite side of the bike. I love having a loud horn on my motorcycles. So yeah, that's really nice. That actually wires in. I've not used the CanSmart that these are connected to. I'll show you that in a minute. I've connected that straight to the horn wiring with a little Nippy Norman's cable adapter and a bit of homebrew wiring. So yeah, no overloading, no worries as far as I'm aware. So yeah, quite happy to have those horns on this bike. CanSmart, hold on a minute. Bit hard to see the CanSmart, but it's basically velcroed to the top, to the underneath of this frame rail. So it's hanging in the air, it's not just bouncing around in the bottom of the bike. So yeah, this is connected to my Denali lights at the front. One light per output, called left or right lights, which can dim with the indicators. So I needed to have 2 separate feeds to the light so they can be basically switched on and off by the bike independently. One cable going to a new device I bought recently, just more USBs basically for my for my cameras. So I've got a spare one there and another one connected to this. The last output there is going to the B6, you can't see it, I'm going upside down there. The B6 rear light, an extra rear light, because I thought the stock light under there could be a little bit hidden when I've got a top box on the bike. Not that it really would be, but I just found that the light is quite close to the bottom of the rack, and I just thought with a top box on, the light isn't as visual or as visible as it might otherwise be. So I added an extra rear light there. That is really bright. So here's a B6 light, It's a bit hard to gauge the brightness here, but here's a brake off and here's a brake on. This is a camera exposure messing about as well. But yeah, that is a very bright light. What else have I fitted? We know about the fender extender, pyramid plastics. I've got a little front engine breastplate protector there. RNG radiator protector as well. Handguards I'm really pleased with in conjunction with the heated grips. These make a nice windbreak and get the wind off the top of my gloves, off the top of my hands, where these are warming up the palms of my hands. So I'm happy with having these on all the time on my bike. And I've got these tank protectors here for a little bit of grip when I eventually learn how to hang off this bike properly going around the track. Now, yeah, I've got a little performance bike sticker there because what should be there is this little badge, but the one on the other side fell off. Now, this material is clear, pretty much, supposedly. I'm finding I'm getting it grubby when I'm rubbing my clothes against it. So it doesn't look so clean. I think at some point I'll replace these and go with a solid color perhaps. But I suppose they'll always get dirty one way or the other. But these seem to get grubby quite quickly after I fitted them, after a few weeks. That is an impact with the track. Can you see that? A bit hard to see. So I think I might have touched that down here, and I think on the other side as well. Now, suspension settings and electronic assists. What do I use? Well, if I press that button there, you can see I'm using road mode for the soft suspension damping and max for the preload. Max is not the recommended setting. Auto is a recommended setting, but I find that with road mode and auto on the preload, the rear end of the bike is just too soft. It's too bouncy, even under moderately sporty riding. Not very sporty, not the kind of sporty that would demand you to go to dynamic mode on the damping. I'm not actually a big fan of dynamic mode on damping here on the left if I switch it to that, because I find the damping then too firm for the road. So for me, the combination of road on the damping, max on the preload, makes the bike, especially the rear end, a little bit stiffer and raises the back a little bit, because it basically raises the rear ride height by adding preload to the spring. So I find none of the settings are perfect, but I find that combination works the best for me. In terms of the rider mode, normally by pressing mode button, between rain, road, dynamic and dynamic pro, to be honest with you, I tend to have it on dynamic. Sorry, I stopped at the wrong one. Normally. Why? Well, because dynamic and dynamic pro make no difference in terms of the throttle response or the power output. So the difference between dynamic pro and dynamic is when I get into the settings, all the way over there, settings, and I think vehicle settings, and dynamic pro setup, which is down here somewhere. What it does is give you the option of messing about with engine mode, which is throttle response, and traction control independently. There you go. So for instance, I could have, if I really wanted to, the lowest traction control setting in conjunction with the sportiest throttle response, or medium throttle response, or lowest throttle response. So Dynamic Pro there isn't no extra setting, no higher performance setting. Dynamic, the other setting, is really just having this set on max and that set on max. That's pretty much it. Dynamic Pro lets you turn one or the other one down. So it's a shame, because on my S1000 single R I had before this, if I set that to Dynamic Pro, it turned off wheelie control, but kept traction control. You cannot separate the two on this bike. Rather disappointing in my opinion. You can turn off traction control and wheelie control altogether. That will turn them both off. I find if I go road mode, all the way around again, the throttle action is just a little bit too long for the amount of thrust you get, the amount of acceleration you get. I find that you twist just a little bit more than you might on a kind of carbureted bike, let's say, to get the right amount of thrust. So yeah, I like dynamic, stroke dynamic pro, although occasionally at low revs and low speeds, sometimes it's a little bit snatchy, but I live with it. I have been talking about how nice the slide control is from the ECU. The wheelie control isn't quite so good, but what I've discovered is if I manage to get the front wheel up in the air, and if I moderate the throttle and not panic, twist too hard, it can actually maintain a bit of a wheelie. It can get the front wheel a few inches in the air and stay there until you roll off or change gear or give it a little bit of extra throttle to try and keep the front end up. Then the ECU goes, hold on, front's rising too fast, I'm stopping your fun. So it's possible to maintain some low level wheelies out of this bike, and probably higher ones if you were a better rider than me. I'm better at wheelies. I've always been bad at wheelies. But since a wheelie school that I attended recently, a lot of the fear out of even fairly low wheelies has gone. So on closed courses, I've been getting the front wheel in the air more often, and it's been quite a bit of fun. One of the best bits of the bike is this ECU for what it allows in terms of traction control when I'm at the track. The way it modulates power slides, it's unbelievable. I didn't realise I'm leaving black lines out of most corners on the track in the dry through second and third gear. I was only told about it, and now I feel it happening. I feel the ECU allowing that to happen without the bike getting out of control, and it's a glorious thing. It really is. So after 10,000 miles, what do I like the most about this bike? Ooh, let's put my bits back on, shall we? What I like the most about this bike is the torque. I've said it before, I love this engine, really do. Now compared to a 4-cylinder, yes, it hasn't got the top end power of a 4-cylinder bike, but at real world speeds on the road, it performs brilliantly for a heavy bike. So stable, but agile handling. Believe it or not, although you might be able to see that the forks are quite raked out. It's not a sporty steering head angle. I do have a steering damper as well, as standard. So yeah, this bike is rock solid. It's really hard to upset, even at the track. And that's one of the things I like about it a lot as well. The ECU, now I've learnt how the traction control and essentially the slide control kind of aspect of that works on this bike. Love it. Much more sophisticated than I thought it would be when I first got the bike. And yeah, in conjunction with being able to hold a bit of a wheelie if you can, if you're careful with the throttle as well, just makes this bike more playful than I thought it was back at the beginning. So as I've grown to enjoy this bike and get used to it, I've actually just started liking it even more. So yeah, it can be a very sporty, big, naked bike, but as I've proven to myself anyway, in a 1,200-mile journey recently over a few days up north, it can just do large miles. I think the largest amount of miles I did, what did I do? It was 350 miles in a day, I think, but a lot of that was off the motorway. A lot of that was little nadgery kind of hillside roads, and in all weathers as well. But so as long as you've got the riding kit to bear rubbish weather, this bike can do long distances with no trouble. And if you really want to relax, put the throttle in rain mode or road mode, soften the suspension off electronically, and it's like an armchair. It's just really quite relaxed. It can take luggage. So if I have my top box on there, and I've had the BMW soft bag there, or a waterproof roll top bag with my leathers in there. So yeah, it can carry luggage as well. So I have been thinking about maybe going for the BMW panniers. Yes, I could go for other panniers from other makes, but you know, I've got the mounts and I've got the pannier framework that came with the bike. So I'm thinking about going for BMW panniers. It's just going to take a bit of saving because they are something like £700 new for a pair. Never been a big fan of panniers because at some point I'll probably forget that I got them on. If I'm doing some sort of slow speed tight corner or going through gate posts or something, I think I might forget. That is a very real concern for me with using panniers. But I like the idea of the extra carrying capacity, so we'll see how that goes. Another thing I really like about this bike is the shaft drive. That long journey up north I took included a track day. So all that time, you know, week, 1200 miles riding, didn't have to worry about chain maintenance once, didn't have to oil anything, didn't have to adjust anything. Got back home, still don't have to adjust anything. This is brilliant. Although I do worry that I might become the poster child for what you shouldn't be doing to a shaft drive BMW, i.e. taking it onto the track regularly. Maybe the shaft drive and the UJ joints might make a bid for freedom one day and wreck the bike. Let's hope not. I think generally though, these shaft drive bikes, these BMs, are reliable. You do hear scare stories, but I think what you don't hear are people happily racking up thousands of miles day in, day out and not having anything negative to say about the shaft drive. In terms of how it feels compared to a chain drive bike, well, I've been riding for over 30 years and to be honest with you, it doesn't feel much different at all to a chain drive bike. One thing that does feel strange sometimes, if you go over certain road surfaces that are a little bit torn up, where maybe the top layer of tarmac's gone and you kind of got lots of stones facing outwards or pebbles facing outwards, you ride over those. Sometimes it feels like the transmission's about to fall out of the bike. And in the early days, I really thought something was wrong. Not to be confused with my feeling about the vibration at certain revs that I mentioned earlier. But sometimes over certain road surfaces, the transmission feels horrible, like something's wrong. But as soon as you move sideways a little bit onto a smoother bit of road, the problem goes away. So it's just some weird aspect of how it picks up the road surface when the road surface isn't in good condition. Bit of an odd one, but you get used to it. Gearbox, what I find, people do say the box of gearboxes are clunky. I agree. The first 3 gears are a little bit clunky, I find. Sometimes you go into first and it's smooth as anything. Sometimes you go into first and you just get quite a big clunk through the bike. Going up through second and third or down to second and first. Sometimes the gear lever fights your toe a little bit, fights your foot a little bit, but it goes in. 4th, 5th and 6th generally are quite smooth. Occasionally I'll get force neutrals, occasionally, very rare, but you get that with most bikes, I think. So yeah, it doesn't happen very often. It's usually when I'm a bit lazy with the gear change, especially if I'm using the quick shifter, because this bike does have a quick shifter and an auto blip for down change. Now the quick shifter going up, not the smoothest, but I'd rather have it than not have it. So I'm happy that it's there. Downshifting, brilliant. I'm happy with it. It's as good as most other auto blippers out there in the market, I think, for going down the box. So I'm jumping around a little bit from topic to topic. Something I just thought of is running costs. Well, unfortunately, I can't really speak too well of running costs because I've been on track days. I'm using this bike in a kind of a atypical way. So tyre wear is greater than I think most people would go through in their bike ownership. For instance, I took the front tyre, the last one, down to wear markers in the centre of the tyre in 4,000 miles. So 4,000 miles from the front is not normal. So yeah, I can't really talk to you about normal tyre wear. What I can tell you about are the tyres I'm using, and they're Metzeler M9RR tyres. And I really do like them. Much better than the stock Z8s that the bike came with, Metzeler Z8 tyres. Grippier, more confidence inspiring, without a doubt. Now, I haven't tried any of the marks yet, really. 10,000 miles, I haven't done that many miles. I haven't had that much need to keep changing tyres. I think this is my 3rd M9RR on the back. because I had a puncture in one after about 2,000 miles, which was very disappointing. Couldn't be repaired. I think that's my second M9RR at the front. So yeah, I'm giving the bike quite an appetite for tyres, unfortunately. I've had 2 services so far. The first one was about 180 quid for the 600 mile service. Second one was, I think, knocking on the door of £300 for a 6,000 mile service. The one after that, the next one coming, I suppose, is going to be a valve check, valve clearance check. So I'm bracing myself for that one. Oh, through my track days as well, giving it like that, giving it a bit of an appetite for front brake pads as well. So the front brake pads had to be replaced at about 8,000 miles. Again, heavier usage than you would normally expect. I fitted some Brembo SA brake pads for my Hayes calipers, my BMW branded Hayes calipers on the bike. The brake pads were recommended to me by my good internet friend Carl, and his channel is Just the Way It Is. He is a long-time automotive technician, so he knows his onions. I took his advice, fitted some sportier brake pads, and yeah, I find that the braking performance has improved. One of the things I haven't even talked about on this bike is the linked brakes. I absolutely love the brakes on this bike, on the road or on the track. Now the front end does dive quite a bit when you are hard on the brakes, which is a bit of a shame. It's not a teddy lever front end, it's just upside down forks. I'm pretty happy with the forks generally. But yeah, it's just with the linked brakes, the bike still, even though the front dives, the bike still feels very stable. It's being braked from both ends when you're slowing down. And yeah, I find the linked brakes are fantastic. So with the new brake pads, yeah, I get a little bit extra stopping power compared to the stock brakes. I was happy with the stock brake pads. I was gonna replace the worn out front ones with a new pair of stockers until I saw Carl's videos on the subject. So I'm quite happy with the stock brake pads, to be honest with you. But yeah, the new ones from Brembo for these Hayes calipers, yeah, they help a little bit more for performance stuff. Oh, there is one thing I haven't mentioned actually, just before I sum up. My bike is keyless ride, and just a few days ago I got a warning on the bike that the key battery is down to 50%, but currently no functional impairment. So after about 18 months, I suppose your mileage will vary about how often your key's close to the bike versus how much time it spends away from the bike. But yeah, 18 months, 10,000 miles, battery's at 50%, so I will be getting it replaced soon. Screens. Now, I've been through several screens. That's the OEM Sport screen. This is a Puig Sport screen, I think, if I remember rightly. This is for my old S1000R, which I adapted to fit the bike. Basically, all these screens are crap. What I find is they all increase wind noise. Not so much buffeting. I don't seem to have a big problem with buffeting, but wind noise, roar in my crash helmet. With all these screens, there's more of it. So I find that it's best to leave this bike as it is, naked as the day it was born. The only exception is at a track day, where I find that this screen on the front there with the proper mounting hardware does deflect the wind off the top of my helmet, especially when I'm down, kind of low down and going down the straights. That stops my head being pulled around quite so much, so it kind of reduces tugging on the crash helmet. So this works quite well on the track day, but ultimately what I've learnt is that none of these screens work for me on the road. So I think that's about it from me. If I've missed anything, drop me a line in the comments. If you have some longer questions, more detailed questions, because you're thinking of buying one of these, drop me an email. I've got some contact details on my channel page. I'll be happy to help where I can. So yeah, in summary, loving the bike. Having a lot of fun with it. You know, it's not the flashiest, most attention grabbing machine out there, but the way it rides suits me down to the ground.